The year is 2241, and humanity's greatest threat has arrived. For centuries, Earth had been a quiet, peaceful planet, an isolated dot in the vastness of space. But all of that is about to change. Humanity's future now hangs in the balance, as the galaxy's most feared species, the Exarathians, have set their sights on Earth. This is not just a war for resources or territory. This is a war of annihilation. The Exarathians are ruthless, technologically advanced, and have left a trail of destruction across countless worlds. They are known for one thing: their ability to destroy any civilization they choose. No one has ever stood a chance against them. The Exarathians' empire stretches far and wide, and the Galactic Council, the most powerful group of species in the galaxy, has long feared their expansion. But despite the warnings from the Council, the Exarathians have always considered themselves the apex predators of the galaxy. They believe no species could ever threaten their dominance. Now, as their ships approach Earth, they are about to learn just how wrong they were. On Earth, the news comes like a thunderclap. The Galactic Council, normally silent in its dealings with Earth, sends a message, urgent and terrifying. The Exarathians are coming. They will wipe out your species. Prepare. The message spreads like wildfire across the globe, sparking panic and chaos. Governments scramble to find solutions, but the world's military forces are no match for the Exarathians' might. No one knows how to fight them, and their weapons are far beyond anything humans have ever seen. In the chaos, people are left helpless. Earth's cities, once bustling with life, are now sitting ducks. The Exarathian warships descend from the sky like dark, unstoppable giants. Their ships glow with the ominous light of advanced technology, far beyond anything humanity has ever imagined. These ships, massive and terrifying, unleash waves of destruction, tearing through cities with lasers and powerful energy blasts. Buildings crumble, fires rage, and the sky darkens as the Exarathians make their presence known. Among the millions of people watching in horror as their world crumbles is a young soldier named Bonner. He's just one of the many soldiers who had been trained for a war that seemed impossible. As the Exarathian ships hover above Earth, their engines humming with power, Bonner knows that humanity's survival is hanging by a thread. His heart races as he watches the destruction unfold on the streets below. Exarathian warships glide through the atmosphere, effortlessly cutting through Earth's defenses. Each ship is an advanced fortress of death, with weapons capable of vaporizing entire cities in the blink of an eye. Bonner knows that the odds of survival are slim. Humanity has never faced an enemy like this before. The Exarathians are stronger, faster, and more technologically advanced. Their ships are equipped with cloaking devices that make them nearly invisible, and their weapons can obliterate entire cities without warning. But Bonner also knows that humanity isn't without its secrets. There's something hidden, something that could turn the tide of this impossible war. The only glimmer of hope for Earth lies in a project that few even know exists. Deep within Earth's most secure military facilities, a secret project called Project Helios has been in development for years. It's a last-ditch effort to create technology that could give humanity a fighting chance against the Exarathians. But no one knows if it will work. There are whispers that Project Helios could be the key to turning the tide. It's a risky plan, one that involves experimental technology that could either save or destroy them all. As the war intensifies, Bonner is thrust into the chaos. His unit, part of an elite group of soldiers, is tasked with defending key military sites from the Exarathian onslaught. But with each passing day, it becomes clearer that no amount of conventional weaponry will stop the Exarathians. Their ships are too powerful, their forces too overwhelming. Bonner's team fights valiantly, but they're outmatched at every turn. Earth's military forces are quickly falling apart, and humanity's survival seems impossible. The world is on the brink of collapse, and Bonner knows that the clock is ticking. The Exarathians aren't just here to invade. They are here to eradicate humanity. There's no time to waste. If Project Helios is going to save them, they need to act quickly. Bonner and his team are ordered to make their way to the military base where Project Helios is being developed. But reaching the base won't be easy. The Exarathian warships are everywhere, and the skies above Earth are filled with the terrifying sounds of alien ships preparing to destroy anything in their path. Bonner, determined not to let Earth fall without a fight, leads his team on a perilous journey to the heart of Project Helios. They are running out of time, and with each passing moment, the Exarathians tighten their grip on the planet. Bonner knows that if they don't succeed, humanity is finished. As they move deeper into enemy territory, the team faces constant danger from Exarathian patrols and automated defense systems. The tension is palpable. Every step forward is a step closer to either victory or death. As they approach the site of Project Helios, Bonner can't help but wonder, what is this secret weapon? Will it really work? Or is it just another failed attempt to fight an enemy that is simply too powerful? The fate of humanity rests in their hands, and every second feels like an eternity. The sound of Exarathian warships growing louder in the distance fills the air as Bonner and his team reach the entrance to the secret facility. The weight of what they're about to face hangs heavy on their shoulders. They've survived the worst of the invasion so far, but they know that their real fight is only just beginning. As Bonner steps into the dark, high-tech facility, the team steels themselves for what lies ahead. Inside, they'll find the technology that could save humanity, or lead to its downfall. The stakes have never been higher, and Bonner knows that nothing will ever be the same again. The Exarathians are coming, and humanity's only hope may be a secret weapon buried deep within the heart of Earth. The countdown has begun, and there's no turning back now. The fate of the human race rests in the hands of a few brave soldiers who must now face the most terrifying enemy the galaxy has ever known. The human resistance had formed in secret, but now, under the crushing weight of the Exarathian invasion, it was becoming humanity's last hope. What began as a small group of soldiers and scientists had quickly grown into a well-organized force, spread across the shattered remnants of Earth. These people, once scattered and divided, now had a single purpose: survival. Among them was Bonner, a young soldier who had witnessed the devastation of Earth firsthand and had sworn to do whatever it took to turn the tide of war. He had been part of the early skirmishes, fighting against overwhelming Exarathian forces, but now he was part of something much bigger. Behind the scenes, the human scientists had been working tirelessly to develop technology that could stand up to the Exarathians' superior weapons. For years, they had been quietly perfecting a top-secret project, Cloak Tech. This groundbreaking technology had the potential to turn the tables in the war. Cloak Tech was a form of invisibility technology, capable of rendering entire squads of soldiers completely invisible to the Exarathian sensors and eyes. It was a game-changer. With the right plan, a small team could infiltrate Exarathian strongholds, sabotage their operations, and strike where the enemy least expected it. The project had been kept under tight wraps, and the world's governments had no idea of its existence. Bonner, having proven his skills in battle, was selected to lead an elite team to test the Cloak Tech in a real-world mission. The plan was simple but dangerous. They would infiltrate a Exarathian supply ship, plant explosive charges, and then escape before the Exarathians even realized they were there. It was a daring mission that would test both the technology and the team's ability to execute it flawlessly. The day of the mission arrived. Bonner's team gathered in the shadows of an underground base, surrounded by the hum of machines and the tense energy that comes before a high-stakes operation. Each soldier was equipped with a Cloak Tech device, a sleek, high-tech suit that shimmered with a faint, almost imperceptible glow. When activated, the suits would make the wearers invisible to the naked eye and to most forms of detection. The suits were cutting-edge, but still untested in combat. Bonner felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, knowing that if they failed, it could mean the end for everyone. They boarded a small, stealthy craft, heading towards the Exarathian supply ship. As they approached the ship's massive hull, Bonner couldn't help but feel a surge of awe and fear. The Exarethian ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Towering, dark, and sleek, they seemed to absorb the light around them. Their technology was far superior. And yet, here they were, preparing to strike at the heart of the enemy's operations. The ship's defense systems were formidable, but the cloak tech gave them a fighting chance. Bonner and his team were able to move through the air vents and corridors of the ship, unseen and unheard. They were ghosts in the machine, slipping past the Exarethian warriors who patrolled the ship's vast interior. The tension in the air was palpable as Bonner's team moved deeper into the ship, each step bringing them closer to their target. They had no idea how much time they had before the Exarethians noticed their presence. Every corner they turned, every door they opened, could bring them face to face with death. But the cloak tech was holding up. The technology worked just as promised. After what felt like an eternity, they'd reached the storage bay where the Exarethians kept their valuable resources and supplies. The room was guarded by a few Exarethian warriors, but the team moved swiftly, bypassing them with ease. They planted the explosive charges with precision, ensuring that the explosion would cripple the ship's ability to respond to the Resistance's attacks. The countdown had begun, but there was no time to relax. They had to get out, fast. Just as Bonner's team was about to make their escape, an alarm blared throughout the ship. The high-pitched sound echoed through the metal corridors, sending waves of panic through the team. The Exarethians had detected something. The invisible shield that had protected them was no longer enough to keep them safe. Bonner's heart raced as he signaled his team to move. The mission was far from over. They sprinted through the darkened corridors, their footsteps muffled by the technology, but the Exarethians were closing in. The ship's internal security system had been triggered, and squads of Exarethian warriors were sweeping through the ship, hunting for intruders. The once silent corridors were now alive with the sound of alien footsteps and harsh commands being shouted in an alien tongue. Bonner knew that if they were caught, they would be killed on the spot. The team split up, using the ship's narrow hallways and air ducts to hide. The cloak tech was working, but only just. The Exarethian sensors were sophisticated, and it was only a matter of time before they figured out how to locate them. Bonner's mind raced as he calculated their chances of survival. They couldn't afford to stay in one place for too long. The mission would be a failure if they didn't get out. A Exarethian soldier passed within inches of Bonner, his heart pounding in his chest. It was a miracle that the alien didn't see him. The tension was unbearable. One wrong move, and the whole mission could go down in flames. They had to keep moving. The countdown clock on the explosives continued to tick down. Bonner knew they didn't have much time left. If they didn't make it to the extraction point in time, the charges would detonate, and the mission would end in disaster. The ship would be destroyed, and they would be trapped inside. The team regrouped in a maintenance corridor, just a few steps away from the ship's exit. Bonner checked his communicator. No word yet from the extraction team. He could hear the Exarethian soldiers' voices growing louder, but they were still undetected. They had made it this far. They just needed one last push to escape. As they neared the exit, the alarms grew louder, signaling that the ship was going into lockdown. The Exarethians were closing in from all directions. It was now or never. Bonner led the way, breaking into a sprint toward the exit. The rest of the team followed, adrenaline pumping through their veins. The Exarethians were right behind them, but Bonner didn't look back. He pushed forward, every step bringing him closer to freedom. Just as they reached the final door, it slammed shut. The ship's security systems had locked them inside. Bonner cursed under his breath. This was it. But then, the door began to open, and they were greeted by the roar of their extraction team's craft, waiting just outside. With seconds to spare, Bonner and his team jumped into the waiting craft, which shot off into the sky, narrowly avoiding the incoming Exarethian fire. The ship's engines roared to life, and the team soared through the atmosphere, leaving the Exarathian vessel behind them in flames. The sabotage had been a success. The Exarathian supply ship had been crippled, and the humans had scored their first victory in the war. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give them hope. Bonner looked at his team, each of them breathing heavily but alive. They had done the impossible. They had infiltrated the Exarathian ship, planted explosives, and escaped without being caught. For the first time in this war, humanity had struck back. This victory was just the beginning. The Exarathians had underestimated humanity before, and now they had made a dangerous mistake. The resistance was growing stronger, and with cloak tech in their arsenal, they had the power to change the course of the war. It was only a matter of time before the Exarathians would learn that humanity would not go down without a fight. The success of the sabotage mission had been a small victory, but it was clear that the Exarathians were not going to sit idly by. They had underestimated humanity once, but they wouldn't make the same mistake again. The damage caused by the sabotage was significant, but it only fueled their rage. The Exarathians were known for their ruthless retaliation, and now they were preparing to show Earth just what their full wrath looked like. It began with an ominous signal broadcasted across the planet. The sky grew dark as the Exarathian warships gathered overhead, and the air was thick with anticipation. For the first time, humanity could see the true scale of the Exarathians' might. These were no ordinary invaders. They had sent their deadliest forces to Earth. Tidroth Prime, the leader of the Exarathian military, and his elite warriors, a force so powerful that even the mightiest of galactic species trembled at the mere mention of their name. Hatzareth Prime was a legend in the galaxy, a being of immense strength and intelligence, feared by all who had ever crossed his path. His elite warriors were known as the Vorga, and they were the most brutal, relentless soldiers in the entire Exarathian army. These warriors were genetically enhanced, equipped with weapons that could disintegrate entire squads of soldiers with a single shot. The Vorga had never been defeated in battle, and now they were descending upon Earth with a single goal: to crush the human resistance once and for all. As the Exarathian forces arrived in the atmosphere, Bonner and his team knew that this was the beginning of something far worse than they had ever imagined. The skies darkened with the shadows of the alien ships, and the ground trembled as the Vorga warriors landed. They began their brutal assault, sweeping through human defenses with terrifying precision. The Exarathians weren't just targeting military installations anymore. They were hunting down civilians, tearing apart entire cities, and showing no mercy. Bonner stood in the command center, staring at the screen as the images of destruction flashed before his eyes. Earth had never faced anything like this. The resistance forces, although growing stronger, were nowhere near prepared for this kind of onslaught. Bonner had seen the strength of the Vorga before. He had fought against their kind in skirmishes, and he knew how devastating they could be. Now, they were here, and there was nothing standing in their way. In the midst of the chaos, Bonner discovered something that turned his stomach. As he gathered intel from a captured Exarathian soldier, he learned the full extent of the Exarathians' plan. They weren't just here to conquer Earth and enslave humanity. They had something far worse in mind. The Exarathians had developed a planet-cracking weapon, one powerful enough to destroy entire worlds. It was a massive device, hidden on Earth's moon, and its power could wipe out the entire human race in a single devastating strike. The weapon, known as the Cataclysm Cannon, was designed to shatter a planet's core, sending it into destruction. The Exarathians had already activated the weapon's countdown, and it was only a matter of time before it would be unleashed. The realization hit Bonner like a sledgehammer. They weren't just fighting for survival now. They were fighting for the very existence of humanity. The Exarathians had a weapon capable of ending Earth's life, and it was already locked and ready to fire. There was no room for hesitation, no time to waste. Bonner knew that the only way to stop the Exarathians was to destroy the Cataclysm Cannon before it could be activated. But that meant infiltrating the moon base where the weapon was being kept, facing the Exarathians' most powerful forces head-on, and somehow disabling the weapon. The mission was nearly impossible, but it was humanity's last hope. Bonner and his team gathered in the briefing room, staring at the holographic map of the moon base. The base was heavily fortified, surrounded by Exarathian warriors and automated defense systems. It was a death trap, one that even the most elite forces would struggle to infiltrate. But Bonner knew there was no other choice. If they didn't act fast, humanity would be wiped out. The plan was risky. They would have to travel to the moon undetected, using their newly developed cloak-tech suits to remain invisible to the Exarathian sensors. Once they landed on the moon, they would have to navigate through a maze of tunnels and military strongholds, avoiding enemy patrols and automated turrets. The Cataclysm cannon was housed in a central control room, heavily guarded and protected by layers of security. The team would have to plant explosives and disable the weapon's power source before it reached its final countdown. Failure would mean the end of everything. Bonner briefed his team, their faces a mixture of determination and fear. They knew the risks, but there was no other option. The Exarathians had already shown what they were capable of, and Bonner wasn't about to let his planet be destroyed without a fight. He trusted his team. They had survived impossible odds before, and they would do it again. As the team boarded the stealth shuttle, heading toward the moon, Bonner's mind raced. He couldn't help but think about the consequences of failure. If they didn't stop the Exarathians, Earth would be lost. The weight of the mission bore heavily on his shoulders. He had seen his comrades die before, and he knew that some of them might not make it back. But he had to push those thoughts aside. The mission was too important. The shuttle cut through the dark expanse of space, heading toward the moon at breakneck speed. The tension was unbearable as the team prepared for their descent. Bonner could feel his heart pounding in his chest. Every second that ticked by brought them closer to the most dangerous mission of their lives. As they approached the moon's surface, the massive Exarathian base came into view. The complex was a sprawling fortress, built into the very rock of the moon itself. Towering walls, turrets, and searchlights covered every inch of the base, making it seem impenetrable. The team's shuttle hovered just above the surface, and Bonner gave the order to begin the descent. Using their cloaking technology, the team became nearly invisible, blending into the shadows of the dark lunar surface. They landed near the base's entrance, disembarking quickly and moving toward the nearest security tunnel. The air was cold, and the silence was eerie as they slipped through the base, staying one step ahead of the Exarathian guards. The plan was to move swiftly and silently, planting explosives along the way to disable the base's security systems. But as they got closer to the central control room, the pressure began to mount. Time was running out, and they had to act fast. Every step they took brought them closer to the heart of the enemy's power. Bonner could feel the weight of the mission growing heavier with each passing moment. The stakes were higher than ever before. If they failed, the world would be destroyed, and the human race would be no more. But if they succeeded, they could stop the Exarathians and save Earth. There was no going back. The final showdown was coming, and the fate of humanity was in their hands. The battle for Earth had escalated to unimaginable levels. The Exarathian fleet, vast and unstoppable, descended upon Earth's major cities, bringing with it chaos, destruction, and terror. The first wave of assault had been swift and brutal. Entire cities were leveled in the blink of an eye, while the Exarathian warships obliterated anything that stood in their way. Buildings crumbled, streets became battlegrounds, and people scrambled to survive amidst the devastation. The Exarathians were relentless, their forces seemingly endless, and it seemed like there was no hope left for humanity. Yet, as the Exarathian ships blotted out the sky, a spark of resistance began to take form. Despite the overwhelming odds, the human survivors were not willing to give up. Using their cloak tech, the humans began to strike back, launching guerrilla warfare attacks from the shadows. With their invisibility technology, small squads of soldiers and civilians could infiltrate Sarathian strongholds, sabotage their supply lines, and carry out surprise attacks, making it clear that Earth would not be conquered without a fight. Bonner and his team were among the first to lead these strikes. They had trained for this moment their entire lives, and now their time had come. The team's mission had shifted from survival to striking back, and they used every piece of advanced technology at their disposal. Among their new arsenal were the combat robots, designed to assist in battle. These mechanical warriors were equipped with powerful energy weapons and were nearly invincible in close-quarters combat. They moved with terrifying efficiency, cutting down Sarathian soldiers as they advanced. The human forces had learned to adapt quickly. Where the Exarathians brought overwhelming firepower, the humans brought their ingenuity. As the Exarathian fleet launched its all-out assault, Bonner's team and the human resistance hit back with calculated precision. They were still outgunned and outnumbered, but they were no longer powerless. The battlefields were now alive with intense action, with humans and Sarathians clashing in every corner of Earth. In the ruined cities, the fight was close and brutal. Bonner and his team found themselves in the heart of the battle, moving through wrecked streets and decimated neighborhoods. The air was thick with smoke and dust, and the sounds of gunfire, explosions, and shouting filled the chaos. Human soldiers fought with everything they had, using their knowledge of the terrain and their advanced technology to even the odds. Exarathians attacked in waves, sending their elite soldiers into the fray, but the humans held their ground. Explosions rocked the streets as Sarathian war machines were torn apart by carefully planned sabotage, and human soldiers engaged in fierce, hand-to-hand combat with Exarathian warriors. The intense action didn't stop on the ground. The Exarathian space stations and orbital platforms were also under assault. The Resistance had developed new tactics, using the cloak tech to board the Exarathian ships unnoticed. In the dark void of space, small groups of human soldiers fought in zero gravity, their movements slow but deliberate as they launched surprise attacks on the enemy vessels. In these confined spaces, the stakes were even higher. One wrong move could send a soldier flying into the cold abyss of space. As the human soldiers boarded the Exarathian capital ships, sparks flew and alarms blared, signaling the chaos that was unfolding on the inside. For Bonner and his team, this was only the beginning. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the heart of the Exarathian fleet and destroy the planet-cracking weapon before it could be activated. The Dominion, the largest Exarathian capital ship, was the key to stopping the weapon. The ship itself was a massive, imposing structure, looming in space like a shadow of doom. Its hull was impenetrable, but Bonner's team had the element of surprise on their side. They boarded the Dominion, slipping past the outer defenses using their cloaking technology. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. The walls of the ship were cold, metallic, and sterile. There was no time to waste. Every second that passed brought them closer to disaster. As Bonner and his team moved deeper into the ship, the eerie silence was broken only by the sound of their footsteps, amplified in the vast, empty corridors. They passed through long hallways lined with Exarathian warriors, their glowing eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. But the humans were invisible, their cloaking technology making them near undetectable. As they reached the heart of the ship, the tension reached its peak. They could feel the weight of the mission bearing down on them. Time was running out, and the Exarathians were beginning to realize something was wrong. Bonner could sense the change in the air, the growing sense of urgency as alarms began to blare through the ship. The crew of the Dominion was on high alert, and the final confrontation was inevitable. But there was no turning back now. They had come this far, and they couldn't afford to fail. The closer they got to the weapon, the more intense the action became. The corridors were now filled with Sarathian soldiers, their weapons drawn and ready for combat. The human team fought their way through, using every weapon at their disposal. Bonner's heart raced as he fought side by side with his soldiers, their movements swift and coordinated. Explosions rocked the halls as they planted charges, taking out the ship's power grids and disabling key systems. The Exarathians retaliated fiercely, but the humans fought back with determination, refusing to back down. Finally, they'd reached the control room where the planet-cracking weapon was housed. The massive weapon, a towering structure of metal and energy, loomed in the center of the room, its countdown clock ticking down. But as Bonner and his team approached the control panel, something unexpected happened. The doors slammed shut behind them, and a familiar figure stepped into the room. Exareth Prime had been waiting for them. The leader of the Exarathians stood tall, his armor gleaming in the dim light of the room. His cold, emotionless gaze locked onto Bonner's team. "You're too late," he said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "This planet is mine, and you are nothing but an obstacle." The atmosphere in the room shifted. The tension was unbearable as Bonner and Exareth Prime faced off. The battle for humanity's survival was about to reach its final, most intense moment. The fate of Earth, and of every human on the planet, hung in the balance. There was no turning back now. The final confrontation had begun. The atmosphere in the control room was charged with an unbearable tension. Bonner stood face to face with Exareth Prime, the towering figure of the Exarathian leader, his cold eyes piercing through the dim light of the ship's inner chambers. His voice echoed through the room. "You humans are nothing. You've been fighting a losing battle since the moment we arrived." Exareth Prime stepped forward, his heavy footsteps shaking the metal floor beneath them. Bonner's heart raced, adrenaline surging through his veins as the final confrontation began. He knew this fight was not just for his life, but for the survival of all humanity. The Exarathian leader was a beast in battle, towering over Bonner with immense strength and lethal precision. His armor was nearly impervious to anything the humans had, and his weaponry was far superior. Bonner, though, was a soldier at heart. He wasn't going to let sheer strength be the deciding factor. His greatest advantage was his mind, the quick thinking and resourcefulness that had kept him and his team alive through countless battles. The first few blows came fast and hard. Exareth Prime swung his heavy energy blade with crushing force, but Bonner was quick. He dodged, narrowly avoiding a blow that would have torn him in two. He moved with agility, using the ship's narrow corridors to his advantage, flipping and weaving in and out of Exareth Prime's strikes. Each time the Exarathian leader swung his blade, Bonner narrowly evaded, his mind racing to calculate the next move. He needed to find an opening, a weak spot. The fight was not just about physical strength, it was about survival. Bonner fought with everything he had, but he knew he could never match Exareth Prime in terms of raw power. The Exarathian leader was a force of nature, a warlord who had conquered countless worlds. His strikes were devastating, each one shaking the room and sending shockwaves through Bonner's body. But Bonner's mind raced faster than Exareth Prime's brute force. He moved strategically, using his agility to dodge blows while looking for vulnerabilities in the Exarathian leader's massive form. Each attack from Bonner was carefully calculated, a slash here, a kick there, but nothing that could stop Exareth Prime for long. As the fight dragged on, Bonner's body began to ache, and his energy started to wane. He was outmatched, but he refused to give up. The stakes were too high. The fate of Earth, of humanity, rested on his shoulders. His team, his friends, were relying on him. He could not afford to fail. The explosion in the distance, he knew it was the weapon, the heart of the Exarathian fleet, was counting down. He could hear it in the back of his mind, echoing like the ticking of a clock, growing louder with every passing second. The weapon was almost ready to fire, and unless something drastic was done, humanity would be wiped from existence. It was then that Bonner noticed it, a slight flicker in Exareth Prime's armor, a weak point just beneath his left shoulder, where the armor wasn't as heavily reinforced. Bonner seized the opportunity. He lunged forward, rolling beneath a massive swipe of Xrf Prime's blade, and with all his might, he drove his knife into the exposed spot. The Xrathian leader let out a guttural roar of pain and rage as Bonner twisted the blade, forcing Xrf Prime back. But it wasn't enough. The Xrathian leader retaliated with a vicious counterattack, throwing Bonner across the room with a force that sent him crashing into a nearby console. Bonner's vision blurred, his body screaming in agony. He struggled to stand, but the weight of exhaustion and pain was too much. He could feel his life slipping away, but there was no time to stop. The weapon was still counting down. The Xrathians were still advancing, and Bonner knew there was only one way to end it. His mind flashed to the failsafe, the last resort that had been designed into the ship's core. It was a dangerous, desperate move, one that could destroy the Xrathians, but also take out everything on the ship, including Bonner and his team. It was a one-way ticket, but Bonner realized it was the only option left. If he didn't act now, the weapon would be fired, and all would be lost. With everything inside him screaming to stop, Bonner staggered toward the core control panel. Xrf Prime was right behind him, his energy blade crackling with deadly power. But Bonner had no choice. He had to end this, no matter the cost. His hand hovered over the button that would activate the failsafe, and for a brief moment, he hesitated. He thought of his team, his friends, and the lives he was about to sacrifice. But then he remembered why he was fighting, why they were all fighting. For Earth, for humanity. With a deep breath, Bonner pressed the button. The ship's core began to hum as it powered up, the countdown starting. The lights flickered and alarms blared, but there was no turning back. Xrf Prime lunged forward, his weapon raised high. But Bonner was faster. With one last burst of strength, he tackled the Xrathian leader, sending them both sprawling to the floor. The force of the impact sent them both sliding across the metal surface, but Bonner held on, locking eyes with Xrf Prime one last time. "You'll never win," Bonner said through gritted teeth, knowing this was the end. Not today. Xrf Prime let out a roar of rage, but the explosion had already begun. The ship's core began to implode, sending shockwaves through the vessel. Xrf Prime tried to push Bonner off, but it was too late. The countdown reached 0, and the core exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Bonner's final thoughts were of his team, his comrades who had fought alongside him. They would live. They would be free. Humanity would survive. As the explosion tore through the ship, Bonner felt his body lift off the ground, weightless in the moment before everything went black. There was no fear, only the certainty that he had done what was necessary. A final message flickered across the communication screens, Bonner's voice weak but resolute. "To my team. Humanity is free. Don't let their sacrifice be in vain." The screen went dark. The aftermath of the battle left the galaxy in shock. For centuries, the Xrathians have been known as the invincible conquerors, a force so dominant that no species dared challenge them. They had swept across the stars, annihilating civilizations with ruthless efficiency. But now, as the remnants of their fleet drifted aimlessly in the void, Earth stood victorious. The underdog had triumphed. The human race, which had been written off as insignificant by so many, had proven its strength, determination, and resilience. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The Xrathian Empire had crumbled, and humanity, underestimated and dismissed, had shattered the myth of their invincibility. The Galactic Council, which had once doubted humanity's potential, now watched with a mixture of awe and respect as Earth began to rebuild. Bonner's death had marked the end of the war, but his legacy would live on forever. Back on Earth, the survivors of the conflict stood together, facing the future with newfound hope. Humanity was no longer the prey of the galaxy, and the resistance movement had evolved into a powerful force. The world had united, its people determined to rebuild from the ruins of war. Cities that had been obliterated by Xrathian bombardments were beginning to rise again. Buildings were reconstructed, the streets once littered with the wreckage of the invaders now filled with life. The scars left by the war were still fresh, but Earth was resilient. The story of humanity's victory was told far and wide, across the stars and through the records of the Galactic Council. The once dismissive members of the Council now acknowledged humanity's potential. Earth, which had been ignored for so long, was now seen as a rising power in the galaxy. No longer a small, insignificant planet in a forgotten corner of the universe, Earth's people were now regarded as formidable adversaries, capable of facing even the most dangerous foes. The Exarathians had underestimated them, and the cost had been their downfall. Yet, despite the victory, the war had taken its toll. Humanity had emerged stronger, but at a great price. Bonner's sacrifice weighed heavily on the survivors, especially on his closest comrades, those who had fought by his side, those who had seen him as a brother in arms. In the days following the destruction of the Exarathian fleet, the resistance gathered to honor the fallen. A monument was erected in his memory, and it stood tall, a symbol of both sacrifice and triumph. The mood was somber as Bonner's team gathered at the monument, standing in silence. The war was over, the battle won, but the grief was still fresh. His comrades, men and women who had fought beside him in the most brutal of circumstances, stood in a quiet, respectful line. They knew the victory was bittersweet. Bonner had given his life to save them all, to save humanity. His sacrifice had sealed their fate, ensuring that Earth would survive. But it also meant that one of their own would never walk with them again. Sergeant Tara, one of Bonner's closest allies, stepped forward first. She had fought alongside him in the final battle. And now, with tears in her eyes, she spoke. Bonner wasn't just a soldier, she said softly. He was a friend, a leader, someone we all trusted to lead us through the darkest moments. He wasn't supposed to die, but he did. And because of that, we're here today. Humanity is free. We'll never forget him. There was a moment of silence as the team nodded, each person lost in their own thoughts, reflecting on the man who had led them to victory. In that quiet moment, it was clear that Bonner's memory would live on. His actions had not only saved their lives, but had changed the course of human history. The Exarathians were gone, but the future was uncertain. Humanity had earned its place in the stars, but what would they do with it? The question lingered in the air as the group slowly began to disperse. The victory over the Exarathians was not the end. It was only the beginning. Earth was on the cusp of something greater, but it would take time. The rebuilding process would not be easy, and there would be many challenges ahead. But Bonner's sacrifice had given humanity something that had been lost for centuries: hope. Hope that they could overcome any challenge, hope that they could rise above their limitations, and hope that they could one day stand as equals among the stars. As the days passed, Earth's leaders gathered to discuss their place in the galaxy. The Galactic Council, which had once dismissed humanity as insignificant, now extended an olive branch. Representatives from other species, once hostile or indifferent to Earth, began to open diplomatic channels. The age of isolation was over. Humanity was no longer alone, and the galaxy was watching. Earth's rise had begun, but it would be up to the people to decide how they would shape their future. In the final moments of the story, we see a sweeping view of Earth from space. The planet, once under threat of annihilation, now stands tall and proud. The Exarathian fleet's remnants float above the atmosphere, their hulking, lifeless ships now nothing more than a silent testament to their defeat. The message is clear: Earth is no longer a defenseless world. Humanity has proven its strength, and they are ready for what comes next. As the camera pulls back, showing Earth's cities gleaming with renewed life, we hear the voice of Sergeant Tara once more. Her words echo through the silence of space, a message to the universe. We are not just survivors. We are warriors. And this is just the beginning. The screen fades to black, and the credits roll. The story may be over, but humanity's journey is far from finished. The galaxy has seen what humans are capable of, and it's only a matter of time before the rest of the universe learns that when it comes to Earth, humanity is a force to be reckoned with.